To jest drugi dzień Kongresu 590, który odbywa się pod hasłem Przestrzenie Wolności. Spotykamy się w Warszawie na torze wyścigów konnych Służewiec. To okazja do spotkań i dyskusji na temat polskiej gospodarki i jej przyszłości oraz perspektyw, ale także do spotkań z gośćmi, którzy przyjechali specjalnie do Warszawy z tej okazji z zagranicy. Teraz gościem studia kongresowego państwa i moim gościem jest Bryan Caplan, profesor ekonomii z George Mason University. Autor książki, między innymi wielu książek o edukacji, o wychowaniu, o posiadaniu dzieci, między innymi książki zatytułowanej Egoistyczne powody, żeby mieć więcej dzieci. Hello, good afternoon. Great to have you here in Warsaw.
Fantastic to be in Poland.
Oh, great to hear it. Thank you for being with us. So, first of all, you're the author of a book called Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids. So to start, tell us, what are these reasons to have more kids?
The main thing I say in the book is that people make parenting bad. It's not bad in itself. People have a bad attitude and a bad focus. Especially
Why?
there's an idea that you have to suffer for your kids. You have to do a lot of unpleasant things, that you were a bad parent unless you force your kid to do karate or taekwondo or play or learn the piano. And what I say is that there's a lot of research from twins and from kids that are adopted showing that actually the effect of parenting in the long run is much smaller than people think. So really you should focus on enjoying your time together instead of trying to invest in your child to give them a great future, which is really up to them.
So nowadays, people, parents, in your opinion, not only in the US, but in Europe also,
yes.
are investing more time and costs and money in parenting, in education than ever, and it's not necessary?
That's correct. What I say is that it's based upon a false theory that if you don't do this, your kid will have a bad life. We have a lot of evidence on this. It is just not true. It's much more important to love your kid and to enjoy doing things with them than it is to go and make sure they go to the best school or they do the right activities. All these things actually really turn out to not be very important. What is important is enjoying your time together. I also talk a lot
You say about evidences. Can you tell us what kind of evidences
sure.
you have?
So there's for thousands of years, people argued about why people turned out the way they do. Is it nature or nurture? Now we've got great evidence from studies of identical twins compared to fraternal twins, from studies of adopted kids compared to biological kids. This allows us for the first time to separate nature and nurture and really measure them. And it does turn out that so much of what we think of as due to upbringing is actually due to genetics. What this means is that parents' ability to change outcomes is much smaller than they think, which is really good news because it means that you don't need to do things that you really hate doing or that your child really hates doing to give them a good future. That is mostly up to them.
So there is no impact, or just a small one?
Yes, it's very small, much smaller than what people think. I do also have a lot of practical, evidence-based ideas for how to make parenting easier. One of the simplest is actually just for sleep training. There are so many parents that suffer for years sleep deprivation, which is a form of torture. The Cheka used sleep deprivation to torture people. Parents torture themselves by allowing their children to not sleep through the night. It is highly effective to simply say the child must cry it out, or that I will pick you up after 10 minutes of crying, then back to bed, 10 minutes of crying, I will put you back. This works very quickly for most kids, and yet many parents refuse to do it on some theory this is going to turn their child into a miserable adult. It is not true. This is just a way to not only get your kids sleeping, but to give yourself a decent life.
How many kids you convinced we have to in the contemporary world?
Let's see. So I've convinced hundreds of people to have more kids. How many kids would I advise an individual to have? Honestly, I would say that depends upon the person. If someone just says, I hate kids, I have no interest in kids, I would say, all right, fine.
Okay.
All right, but
don't be forced to have them.
Yes, mostly I'm talking to people who are interested in kids but are nervous. It's like, I like the idea, but what about losing sleep for 5 years? I like the idea, but what about giving up my whole life and my whole social life in order to be a good parent? And for those parents, I say, look, give yourself a break and relax. And once you relax, the idea of having more kids is no longer scary. It's then one saying, maybe I will. It's
also sometimes a question of cost of living. Parents say, we have one kid because we want to give him a better life. We want to have a higher standard of living.
Right. I mean,
How
of
do you
course,
answer?
that is always a trade-off. I don't say that there are no trade-offs at all. What I do say is they're exaggerated. If you feel like I'm a bad parent unless I send my kid to expensive private schools, I say, no, you're not. That probably is going to make very little difference to their future. I'm a bad parent if I don't go and have them in 7 different activities every week. I say, no, you don't need to do that either. I mean, of course, there is some cost. And yes, when 2 people have 1 child, you divide family income by 3 instead of 2. So, I'm not crazy. I don't say that kids are free. I just say that they are a lot cheaper than people think. And so if you're interested in kids, it is worthwhile thinking about, have I really made the right decision? And especially for a country like Poland where so many people are having 0 or 1 child, going from 1 to 2 or from 2 to 3, for an individual, it is not as scary of a decision as people think. And of course, for a country, it makes the difference between having your population grow and turning into a country of 10 million people in 100 years, which is really, that is the track you are on right now.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, we are. So when thinking about having a kid or kids, we have to think not only about ourselves, but future generations and future of our country.
Right. I mean, especially what I tell people is never refrain from having kids because you feel guilty about hurting the world. I have a whole chapter saying that, well, there are some bad things that human beings do, of course. So there are some environmental harms of kids, for example. But there are also so many good things that human beings do, which are much more important than the bad things. See, if you look at a person and all you can see is pollution, or all you can see is congestion or parking problems, that is a very foolish view of what a human being is. You should also see all the joy they'll experience, all the joy they'll bring to other people. You should think about their accomplishments, things that they might do and achieve. Then the person might be a great scientist or start a business. You say when you look at all the good things versus all the bad things, I say creating a new person is a very good thing to do. So never feel bad to create a person.
When speaking about Poland and our situation concerning our demography, what will be your advice or tips how to construct the demography policy?
So, the first and easiest thing is to change your own mind. I once had a Polish graduate student who said that so many Polish parents are just so hard and they're so worried. And she said, she felt so much better about having kids when talking to me. She now has 3 kids because of just being positive and thinking about positive and constructive ways to make parenting better instead of just saying, well, what can we do? Of course, it's going to be bad. So there's that. In terms of policy, I'm a big fan of saying that families that have more kids have reduced taxes, or like in Hungary, you have your mother has her 4th child, she pays no more taxes. I think probably that policy could be better because I think they only get rid of taxes for the mom. If you're a mom with 4 kids, you probably are not working a lot. So I'd say, but families with more kids to reduce the taxes on the whole family, or I really like the idea of just saying 1 year tax-free every time you have a kid. I think that is one of the best ways. I know many people say that Poland's incentives have not worked. I think it is very easy to be mistaken about that because if the number of kids is falling, you can have a policy that is working, but it is just preventing it from falling even faster. So I would say when the actual experiments on incentives to have kids have been measured, actual incentives in experiments, they do work. So it's very important not to be misled and just say, well, things haven't increased, so they didn't work. You don't know what would have happened instead.
And this is very important also when discussing the impact of the demography on the economy of the country.
Sure. So, especially if you're thinking mainly about bad things that human beings do, it's important to think about good things that people do as well. One of the biggest facts that people barely think about is that almost all new ideas on Earth come from places with large population. So Iceland, it's a great great country, but the number of new ideas on Earth that come out of Iceland is very small because they just don't have enough people. So countries that have a lot of people produce a lot of ideas on average. This is one of the best predictors. And if you just look at history, you will see that almost all idea production comes out of large connected areas of the world with lots of people. So important to keep that in mind. And
migration is not the answer when you have less kids.
Well, so I'm also extremely pro-immigration. The thing about immigration is that it moves people from one country to another, which is great. Having kids actually increases the total number of people, which I would say is even better. Right? If you think that population has good effects, then you do have to say that immigration is great for the receiving country, but it is more mixed for the country that sends. Having more people, I just say, is great for the world. But yes, so I say you don't have to choose. You do not have to choose between having more kids and allowing more immigration. Again, I have a whole other book on immigration.
We can do both.
Yes, there's probably almost no one on earth more pro-immigration than me, but also have more kids too. You don't have to choose.
Thank you very much for this interview and for being here in Warsaw.
Thank you very much. And if I cause the life of one more Pole, I will consider this a great interview.
I hope you did. Thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.